Welcome to the Creative Agency Success Show, the go-to resource for agency owners looking to scale their business. Join us every week to stay ahead of the curve and position your agency for future success.
All right, Jody, this was a great episode. Just the title of his book, "Work Less, Earn More" by Karl Sakas is. Oh, wait, wrong book.
Sorry. Oh, here you go.
just the title of the book is something that I know everybody wants to do. No one wants to work 90 hours a week as they own a business. So I think there's a lot of good tidbits to get companies and owners moving away from that direction.
Yeah. Karl, actually, we talked about a little bit during the podcast, but he did a great job running basically a workshop during our team retreat, which I think really helped our CFOs get a pretty good perspective on creative agencies, from Karl's angle. And I think it was a really solid presentation. Highly recommend it. And so the book is definitely a good starting point. We're going to talk a lot about it here, kind of going even to the consulting side as well.
Yeah, we did it as actually the way we did it was we had our whole team read the book, and then we had them do some homework, and then they came into the training with Karl just adding more to that. So it was a really effective thing. So if you're looking for that for your company, or again, like I say at the end of the podcast, is start with the book. The book is going to really get you going down the path, and you're going to figure out if this is something you want to dive deeper into. But as always, Karl does a great job. Jody does a great job asking questions. So this is a good episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. We've got a rock star on the line with us today. Really excited about Karl Sakas from Sakas and Company. We actually had him come to one of our retreats recently and do some training with our CFOs on this book, and we're like, that was so awesome. We need you to do a podcast. So Karl's joining us today. So welcome to the show, Karl.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So why don't you give us a little bit of your background and kind of what you're going to do?
So James, you're not going to introduce me at all? Is that we're coming down to now? No introduction to me.
I'm not introducing you today. you gave me a hard enough time about missing one podcast already this week.
Fine.
Of course,
don't introduce me. Go ahead.
Of course, Jody's here as always. So Jody's joining us as well. He'll be throwing questions at Karl. But yeah, so Karl, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and kind of tell us what we're going to talk about today.
Well, I came to agency consulting and coaching from an unusual spot, which is in agency operations. I was a project manager, operations manager, director of client services, director of operations. I describe operations as anything that needs to happen, but the agency owner does not want to do it themselves. So that's what I was doing. And over the past decade, or a bit more than a decade, I focused on helping agency owners and key members of their team find ways to work less and earn more.
Yeah, and with that, Karl, you recently had written a book called "Work Less, Earn More." Exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
And like Jamie had mentioned, it was something that we really focused our retreat on. It. We got everybody a book. They read the book in advance, and then you went through some great concepts that really helped out. One thing I would like to point out, and that I'm kind of a little perturbed about, and be honest with you, Karl, is that I'm back here looking at the books that you had, additional reading sources here.
Yes.
And I don't see digital dollars and cents on there at all. I'm so disappointed, Karl, that you admitted not one of but the best book that you could possibly read. What are you going to say about that?
For the second edition update to the book.
It's in the hardback edition. That's what I have. I have the hardback, and it's the first one on there, Jody. So
okay,
don't worry. So Karl, let's dive into the book. I know there's a lot of concepts in there, and I know there's a lot of things we've touched on. But let's start with what you think is the starting point of reading the book.
Well, people tend to read it when they're at some sort of a sticking point. Maybe they've been growing for a while and they've hit a plateau. Maybe they're still growing, but their day-to-day is just kind of, out of control. The way one client put it, it's hard to think about what you're going to make for dinner when you've got a knife stuck in your leg. I don't know where they got the analogy from, but it makes sense. Because, when you started your agency, you probably did it because you're good at the work. Maybe it was design, development, strategy. Clients asked you for more and more. Maybe you started hiring some other people in to help. And suddenly you've got a business. And that probably, for some agency owners, they did start it because they wanted to run a business, but a lot are accidental agency owners. Mm-hmm. So if people are like, how did I get here? That's not unusual. But what do you do about it now? And typically, I found agency owners tend to lean toward one direction or the other. I think of it as a continuum. They lean toward either running a lifestyle agency where it's get above market compensation, do the work they want to do with people they like, things like that. And then at the other end of the continuum is what I would call being an equity agency, where the goal is to sell, to have an exit event. Most people are somewhere in the middle. They're not necessarily 100% one way or the other, but knowing where you want to go, is it you want to do an exit? I mean, that's going to be several years of ramp up to prepare the business, build succession planning, and otherwise make yourself as optional as possible. On the other hand, if you lean toward the lifestyle side of things, you don't have to be as optional, but you can be if you want. So knowing where you want to go is really important. And that's one of the first questions I talk about in the Work Less Earn More book. Where are you on that equity versus lifestyle continuum?
Yeah, it's a great question for you, Jamie. When we bring on clients, I mean, and that's one of the first things we ask them. And
Yeah.
and why is that? Can you kind of expand on what Karl was saying there?
Yeah, no,
Jamie?
especially from the CFO standpoint. If you tell me you're a lifestyle business, I'm going to have a different forecast and different follow-up questions for you. Or if you tell me I'm trying to get out of this in 3 years and get as much money as I can, you're going to run
Yeah.
your business a lot differently. So yeah, like Jody said, that is what we call a back of the napkin meeting. It's one of the first things we do with our clients. We sit down with them, and that's the first question that comes out of it. And then once I know that answer, it helps me guide you as a CFO, because it's almost like you're setting up two different businesses depending on how you answer that question. And what I find is a lot of times people don't know, and so then they lean into the lifestyle, and so then but once they know that they're ready to sell, like it definitely they know it, right? Like that's something that for sure is like I need to go down this path, like this isn't working for me, or hey, I'm ready to move on and try something different.
The key, if you want to sell, is that you need to sort that out as quickly as possible. Because if someone's like, I want to sell in 6 months, you're probably not going to get the best offer, and probably not multiple offers, or if there are, it's going to be a fire sale kind of situation. I have a client that decided like 6 years ago that he wanted to sell his agency. And so part of our ramp up process in our work together, it's shifted over time, but it was around getting ready for that. And most people are looking to sell if they they want to sell sooner than that when I meet them. But the work that you do to get yourself out of the sales process, out of being the sole rainmaker, for instance, out of being the creative director for every decision, that kind of thing, the sooner you start that around elevating current team members or potentially hiring new people or a bit of both, the easier it is for the future transition and the odds of getting a better offer.
And that's so key. I mean, and it's kind of funny. We'll get folks that will come to us and say, "Hey, we've got this person looking. We're in the buying stage or whatever. Can you clean our books up for the last 2 years to make them consistent?" We're like, yeah, we can definitely do that. But when they do that, they may not like the results because maybe they're on a cash basis in the past. It looks great. Put it on an accrual basis, which investors really want to see. What does that look like? And it doesn't really give a chance to actually make corrections going forward. So you're right. The 6 years would be perfect if everybody came to us with a 6-year goal. That'd be awesome. Fortunately, that's not the case for a lot of folks. They've made the decision, for various reasons, and we found that it's a little tougher for them at that point. But if you go in with the idea of the end mind with the end in mind,
Yeah.
when you look at it, it's so much easier. I mean, you got that goal that how, like you mentioned, how to phase yourself out so you get a better multiple. You know how to hire better so you get a better multiple. You know what to cut and how to manage it to get a better multiple. There's a lot of different things. You know what the profit margin needs to be to get a better multiple, and you know that it needs to be there for X period of time and forecast it out. So there's a lot of things that if you really plan it properly, it doesn't make a difference if you're looking to sell today. It's like 5 years from now. Let's say we do 5 years from now.
Right.
Let's make that goal. Let's figure it out so that when time does come, you're in a much better shape, and the multiples is a lot better, and especially if you're looking for something for your family, and it's not something for you to move forward with life, whether it's another business or whatever.
And the flip side is true as well. If you are fully committed to lifestyle and you're like not interested in selling, I've had some clients who said, "Why would I sell? I would just go off and start a new agency."
Exactly.
Well, in that case, make sure you're getting paid what you're worth, or ideally more than you're worth, since,
Mm-hmm.
as the business owner kind of thing. And that also means you don't have to stop doing things you love doing. Maybe if you were looking to sell the business, you'd need to get out of things that maybe you like doing, but a buyer
Sure.
wouldn't want you to keep doing it. If you are fully lifestyle, keep doing what you want to do, but make sure you're getting paid what you're worth, and also that you've reduced your day-to-day stress. So work less, earn more can have a range of meanings. It's all about
Mm-hmm.
finding what your version is.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And the work, the dollar amounts, the kind of the funny part. When we've given we've spoken for many agencies,
Mhm.
hundreds, maybe thousands of agencies, and at one point in our presentation, we always talk about hey, if you're not making at least $150,000 a year as a business owner, then you've got a job.
Yeah.
You might as well either have the lifestyle job that you're looking for or find a job, because the risk and the anxiety, everything that goes along with owning a business is just so great that I truly feel that if you're not at least making that, then it's really not worth it. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, certainly if you are running an agency, you're a bit of a unicorn, right? You're probably good at aspects of client work, at sales, at doing implementation, doing client strategy and things like that. So yeah, I mean, if you were to go look for a job somewhere else, you'd probably be getting at least 150,000.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were an employee, you wouldn't have the stress of carrying the business on your shoulders.
Yeah, we look at a lot of times we look at replacement value, right? Like if you're operating as the CEO, how much would
Yeah,
it cost to replace yourself? Which again, I think goes into your conversation about you're looking to sell the company. Like, is that a role you belong in? So I'm
yeah,
curious because I've had this conversation before, and it doesn't always go well. Of like, you're way too in the weeds as an owner. How do you get out of it? I'm
yeah.
curious, how often do you have that conversation with someone who's looking to sell, and then you just keep pushing them, and they're like, well, actually, I'm turning this into a lifestyle business because I just want to do what I love instead of like pull myself out of the business. I'm curious how often people change their mind because they don't want to get out of the weeds.
People change their mind fairly often for different reasons. Sometimes it's about not getting out of the weeds. Other times people are like, oh, we'll work together. They'll follow my advice. And they're like, huh, things are running more smoothly and it's profitable now and I'm getting paid more. Maybe I don't want to leave after all.
Hmm.
I think a lot of it depends on, the gap between where they are now and where they want to be. And when that gap gets smaller, making changes to pursue that big goal may not be as urgent as if you're in the pit of despair.
It's funny because what you're saying is you're helping them make the business attractive for someone to buy, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I've made this so attractive that I'm going to buy it. I'm gonna stay where I'm at, and
Mm-hmm.
just keep doing what
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing. So yeah, it's funny you said that because that's exactly I've seen
It,
that happen as well.
it reminds me of the house flipping show that you see on TV. I can't remember what it's called, but where they go in and they remodel the house and they decide if they want to keep it or not,
Yeah.
keep it or sell
Yeah.
it. It seems like this is the exact same scenario. You're remodeling your house, and then at that when it's remodeled, is it really worth going out and buying another one, or do you stay with what you currently have? But love the comparison. I just thought of that too. Believe it or not, just thought it right here.
Nice.
So don't steal it. Don't put it in your book number two.
All right. All right.
Okay, so I'm curious. So now that you've had the conversation with the person and said, okay, what's your ultimate
Mhm.
goal, and then
Yep.
you're starting to work towards that goal. What are some of the follow up questions and some of the other things they should be working through now that you've established that?
One of the things that I'll ask new consulting clients is around how they spend their time. I've got a tool that looks at it as a percentage, but I also look at it more qualitatively as well. And specifically, I'll ask, what do you thinking on a day-to-day basis? What do you love doing? What do you hate doing? One of the
Mhm.
things where maybe you don't love it, but you're okay doing it, kind of thing. It's not the urgency to get rid of it, but if you could, that's ideal. And importantly, with agencies where there are multiple owners, each person will answer those questions. And so as I'm doing my analysis, and you can do this on your own, of course, too, I'm comparing, okay, what do people like doing? What do they not like doing? What are the opportunities for quick wins to get the unliked things off their plate? But also looking, is there overlap or is there lack of overlap? For instance, worked with an agency earlier this year where there were two owners, and both said they really did not like doing sales. It's
Hmm.
like, all right, that's okay, but someone is going to have to do sales.
Mhm.
And it turned out that for them, the thing they liked least was dealing with time waster, unqualified prospects at the very early stage. Like they liked
Mhm.
doing later stage closing, consultation and closing conversations, but didn't like dealing with, people who are just flaky. And I said, you can delegate that to a more junior team member. You can have them do the initial screening, whether it's via email on a form or something else, or maybe going to a call. And then you're only on the phone or only on a video call with someone who is theoretically qualified. So that can be a good interim step. If you don't like sales, get someone else doing the baseline qualifying. And I mean, I do that.
Mhm.
As an advisor, I don't hear about people until my team has pre-vetted them.
Yeah, I love that idea, Carl. A question I would have for you is
Yeah.
when you flip it over to the selling side,
Mhm.
when you get to the point where you've got somebody looking to buy, does that help the deal if you've got somebody that's part of that selling process, or do they still look and say, you know what, Carl's the man, he's the one, he's the reason why we
Just lost
actually
him.
have the sales meeting?
Uh-oh.
We'll let him come back
Oh,
and start over. Re-ask.
oh, there
You
you
have to re-ask your question, Jody, because we lost you.
Actually, we didn't lose me, but I just went to the backstage.
go.
Oh,
So the question is, when you have when you have somebody helping out with the sales process,
Mhm.
and you're looking at the end game, where you've got a buyer that's looking to buy you, of course the valuation is going to be determined if you're part of that process, if you are that process, whatever that might be.
Right.
Did you find that really plays a big role in the buyer's head if you're still part of the process, even though you're not in the entire process, or do you think it's actually more of a benefit because then the buyer knows that, hey, somebody else could easily slide in and close that deal because you've got a lot of the initial work out of the way.
Some of that depends on the buyer's goals. Some acquirers of agencies are looking for ways to slot your revenue into their team. Maybe they're doing some sort of accretion, some sort of a roll up where, maybe you've got 5 million in revenue and they've got 10. Well, put the businesses together. Now you've got 15 and they can probably cut some expenses. And, if they're building a roll up kind of thing and the goal is for you to continue being involved, you don't have to be as optional because you're still going to be part of the new business. On
Mm-hmm.
the other hand, if your goal is to retire completely or move on to something else entirely, then being more optional is helpful. I mean, in terms of what's attractive to the buyer, everyone's going to be unique. I would
Mm-hmm.
say that all things considered, the more modular the business is, rather than relying on one person or two people, that gives you some more flexibility.
Mm-hmm. No, I think I agree with you on that. Just thinking through it, I think it probably even makes it easier to make the sale because you got that other person that's heavily involved in the sales process. Because I know when we looked at selling our company, that was a big
Mhm.
question to ask.
Yeah.
What if you go away? Are you still going to bring in the revenue? And it's like, well, yeah, of course. We got this engine built up
Right.
behind us. I'm just simply there to look good or close the sale, whatever you might want to call it.
Yeah.
I'm not the reason that the sale gets closed, and I think that's a big distinction between the two. And it sounds like, yeah, I 100% agree with you on that.
so question on kind of what you talked about there. I think it's a really cool concept of people coming in and saying, "Oh, I don't like sales," and then you drill down into it and be like, "Well, actually, you just don't like this first step of sales, or you don't like this
Yeah.
last step of sales." How would you have someone do that on their own? Of like, is it starting detailed and expanding out, or starting wide and then going into the details? Like, how would you decide whether you don't like a whole process, or is there just certain parts that you don't like? Where if you got rid of these steps 1 and 2, it'd be easier for you.
You could do either direction, either top down or bottom up. I am a fan of working top down. So, for instance, I'll guide clients on creating what I call an advanced retrospective. And I have the
Hmm.
template for that in the Work Less Earn More book, where you're basically writing about your ideal future day as if it's already happened.
Hmm.
And in Work Less Earn More, I talk about writing 5 years in advance. You could do any time period. For instance, I'll do an annual version in my business looking 1 year ahead. But at one point, I also wrote kind of a post-retirement one, say I'm 90 years old, what does that look like? As I'm looking back, kind of thing. But you could start, say, 5 years from now. Today is December 31st, 5 years from now, and it's a great day because, and you write. And the key thing there is that you're focused on the experience you want and perhaps the outcomes you want rather than the nuts and bolts. So then you can enlist your team to get their help in figuring out how to make it happen. For instance, you might, maybe in the sales example, maybe you were on no sales calls, and your team will be like, well, right now you're on every sales call. So how are we gonna figure that out? And your team wants to help if only you ask them, but they need to know where you want to go. And I see this at agencies where the owners are unclear about what they want, and it creates a leadership vacuum where the team is stepping in, trying to do their best. It's not always going to give you the results you want. And, so if the team is clear on where you want to go, well, I mean, if you're clear in the first place, then you can enlist them and you can get their help. So I would start with the top-down approach, but you're probably going to find certain areas where you need to deconstruct the whole process, whether that's your client onboarding process, your employee onboarding process, your sales process, your internal strategy. It could be a range of things, but begin with the end in mind and then work backwards from there.
Because I imagine you're eventually going to have to do it for the owners, but then also do it for the team members and find out what they're doing and be like, oh, actually, Jody has time to take that initial part of the sales call because we did his graphing and he's doing this. And so it's kind of like this thing that just keeps going and going and going until you've worked with everybody in the organization and have at least most of the people doing what they love for the most part and then helping out in other areas. So yeah, it sounds, I would love to see you in operations and see how it actually works because it sounds really fun.
One thing that anyone listening can do, if we think about shadowing, people usually will have the junior person shadow the boss or the manager to see, how something works. But you can also do reverse shadowing, where the boss is shadowing what the employee is doing. And you may do some version of that during training, but you're probably going to find that there are some inefficient things along the way that maybe your employee thought, doing it this way is stupid, but I guess this is the way we have to do it. Whereas if their manager knew and it was an area where, great, yeah, we can make this better, you're not magically going to read everyone's mind. So there's value in shadowing in both directions.
How do you do that without getting in the way? As an owner, if I were to pop on a call with a CFO, I would think the attention, I could be just full of myself, but I would think the attention would be kind of drawn to me being on that call. How do I, as an owner, get into a call like that and don't feel like I've got to actually be the person participating?
One solution is if, you let the clients know that you record the calls for, quality assurance purposes, you can listen to the call afterwards. So that way, your presence isn't potentially confusing things, but you hear what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
But no, Jamie, do you have any ideas on that? On it? Because we do the recording, like you said. I think that works perfect.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if there's a way that we could be on the call and not take away from the credibility of the CFO on the call, I guess.
Yeah, I think it'd have to be a frequent, how frequent you do it thing, right? So like if you made a habit of like, even if you just chose 2 clients of each CFO and you said, okay, I'm gonna jump in once every 6 months, and it's okay. I think if you're in there once every 6 months, it's not going to take away from the credibility of the CFO just to like say, hey, we want to get someone else's perspective in here because I think that's a lot of what our clients are looking for. Like, yeah, they love Jody as a CFO, but I may see things a little bit different and be able to jump in and offer some additional advice there.
I mean, it's really important that you're thinking about that impact, because, having been an employee at agencies before, it's frustrating, where you do your best at something and then the boss comes in and is like, no, blow that up.
Yeah.
I'm a fan. Now, that doesn't mean, you can never give feedback to the team, but here's a better way to do it, which is define the guardrails, define the swim lanes or whatever metaphor you're going to use so that people understand what they're supposed to do, not supposed to do, and also understand, I talk about in the Work Less Earn More book, the values, goals, and resources to consider along the way. And my recommendation is say, if you follow the appropriate values, goals, and resources, I will back you up on whatever you do. I may ask you to do things differently in the future if it's, there's a new development or what have you, but I'm not going to make you go back and tell the client, actually, no, we're going to do something else. As long as they follow the values, goals, and resources. But for that to work, people need to know the values, goals, and resources. So, Jody, to your question on approach, I'd say there are probably two different ways that as the boss, you could be involved in a client call. One
Yep.
is, listening in, and the recording is helpful just to see how did it go, so you can coach. You also may have a situation where maybe on a quarterly basis or the every 6 months, you're involved as the senior person on the team. But to me, that's a different meeting. That's not a routine meeting. It's some sort of a special meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. There are a few things going on there, I think.
That's interesting. So you would say, hey, once a year or twice a year, however often it would be, a Jamie or a me or a Jake or somebody that's got 9, 10, 11, 12 years of experience hops on the call purposely and with an agenda to actually, hey, this is what we're going to talk about at the 6-month point or at the year point. You could easily do that in the creative agency space for those clients that have long-term clients where they would pop on and do a very similar type of a thing. I think that'd be, I think there's a lot of ground. I think there's a lot of positive things to that could really bring to the table.
For sure, and indeed, I think you're tying into a key thing about question I'll get. The owner is asking, how do I delegate account management to the team? When you start the agency, everyone expects you to be the contact, but as you grow the team, you probably don't want to do that forever. So maybe initially you delegate implementation work, the subject matter expert stuff. You delegate project management, then you probably want to delegate account management next. Usually you're still doing client strategy, at least in the early to mid days. The idea there is you're like, hey, so-and-so is great. They are your account manager. They're your day-to-day contact, so that they're running the monthly call or every other week call. But then maybe you're still the client strategist. You're involved at the beginning of the engagement, and then things pass over to the account manager, and then maybe you're making a quarterly or semi-annual or annual appearance with those higher level insights that in theory only you could provide. But importantly, you are not the client's day-to-day contact. You're not the one getting every single email or call. You just show up and share the magic. Your team is taking it from there.
I think that would help a lot of the creative agency owners that just love doing what they're doing, and so they feel like they've got to really be in the weeds. It's like, maybe you don't have to be in the weeds as much as what you think you do. If you've got that second person that can pop in and do the regular routine stuff, throughout the process, and then you pop in, do what you like to do, and do it on a quarterly, annual, semi-annual basis. However often the cadence is, that'd be completely up to everyone here, but I think that's a great way of getting them out of the weeds. And then eventually, once they're doing it for quarterly, semi-annual, whatever, the owner might think, hey, I don't probably need to do this as often. Let me find, have Jamie come in and sit in, because Jamie's doing great with that, and kind of rotating somebody off. I think that could be a great way of transitioning and finding out if that's what you want to do, as an owner. You do that and you're like, I just love meeting with them every week or every month or whatever. And then you transition back, because you can go both ways, as you mentioned, whether you want it to be lifestyle or not. I think that's a great experiment, at least, to see if it works for you.
For sure.
I think the other part of that too is I think it's important to understand why you'd want to do the shadowing, right? So is the purpose of the shadowing for me to see how X person is doing? Is the purpose of the shadowing to add additional value to the client? Is the purpose of the shadowing because I want to see what this person does day to day, because maybe I can take something off their plate? So I think that's probably a really important part of it too, is to understand why you want to do the shadowing. So so with that thought, we're gonna jump into our fun question. So
Okay.
All right. So Jody mentioned a reality show earlier with the house flipping show. So we're gonna stay in that path. So we're gonna everybody, and if you don't have a reality show, you're gonna have to make one up. But what is your favorite reality TV show? So Karl, we'll start with you, and if you don't have any, just like I said, make it up or come up with another show that you really love.
I tend to watch scripted shows rather than reality. I did watch the first season of Love is Blind,
Okay.
and it was sort of terrible and terrific. It doesn't seem to have gotten worse since then. I think I watched part of the second season. I'm like, everyone really needs therapy. I'm a fan of therapy. I've been to therapy for years. I'm like, this seems like a very critical flaw designed to increase the drama in the show, but I don't know. I think once it was clear that people really needed help beyond just being on TV in the pods, the suspension of disbelief stopped.
Well, the funny thing is I think when you said it's terrible and great, I think that's kind of what makes reality television fun. So I think you described it perfectly. I think any reality television you watch, like, that was terrible, but it was also great.
Yeah.
So.
And the one I'm thinking of, Jamie, and I'm trying to Google it right now because I don't want to get the name of it wrong. But it's one with it might be called Tanked. Yeah, Tanked Las Vegas. That's what it's called. Where they go in and they create these really cool fish tanks.
Oh.
And and we're talking fish tanks in a car. They make whatever. I mean, these are really cool fish tanks, and they're obviously very expensive fish tanks, and it goes through the whole thing. And I really enjoyed that, and watch that if it's coming through. That's probably one of the only ones I watch at all. I hate reality TV, and but that one is probably the one I actually do watch when it comes to. I'm a huge fan of fish tanks and fish and all that kind of stuff. And so it's
do you have a tank or multiple?
We used to have a giant tank.
Wow.
We used to have a 150-gallon tank.
Wow.
And it had all kinds of saltwater fish in it. And it was kind of funny because when we went remote, we kind of built. We took a wall out and built the fish tank inside of a wall.
Yeah.
And made it really cool. This is before going remote because the team said they didn't want to go remote.
Okay.
So they were kind of revolted on me. So I remodeled the office, and so I had this installed, and they're super proud of everything. And then of course they decided to go remote. No one ever came to the office again and saw it. So it was just me watching this really cool fish tank.
Yeah.
A lot of cool fish.
I saw it once, so I will say that I was in the actual office once. So for me, I know Jody knows this, but I'm a Survivor diehard. Actually, I watched every season of Survivor until the last two. We have not watched the last two. Just life got a little busy with everything going on. But I've watched every episode, every season up until the last two, and I've actually tried out for the show twice and haven't made it once live and once on video. So maybe we can send this podcast over to the producers and they'll pull me in because I definitely would love to be on Survivor.
Maybe third time is the charm.
Third time is the charm, yeah.
I've not auditioned for a reality show. I did when I worked in New York after college. I did take the in-person Jeopardy test.
Oh.
I did not pass. Imagine, like 70 very nervous, very nerdy people in a hotel ballroom. I think out of the whole group, only like 5% passed the test. So I was not 5%.
Yeah, we watched.
I would have definitely been in the non-man casting group there for sure.
We stick to Celebrity Jeopardy because that way we can get some questions right. Like if we watch Celebrity Jeopardy, we know we get a couple questions right. If we're watching Real Jeopardy, there's like whole categories where like both my wife and I are just silent, no answers.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think this has been a really good episode, and I know we like barely touched on everything that goes into the book because I know Jody and I both read it, and like you said, you did an awesome training for our CFOs. But I want to make sure we give our listeners that final thought, that final tidbit that they can take away from listening to this episode. So Karl, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, and certainly if people want to check out the book, it's Work Less, Earn More: How to Escape the Daily Grind of Agency Ownership. It's available on Amazon worldwide in various formats, print and digital. And I recently released the Audible version. So if you prefer to listen rather than read, it's great for going on a long trip or while you're at the gym or otherwise. It's a 4-hour listen available on Audible worldwide. So, kind of a parting thing. I'd mentioned, begin with the end in mind. You could work backwards to get there. To tie into that, and coming from my operations background, if people are listening and you're like, operations, yuck. Well, someone needs to do it. But a way to look at it, and this is about enlisting your number two and broader team and so on, is this. If you take time to plan for the expected, you'll have time to improvise the unexpected.
Like it.
Yeah, that's awesome, actually.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, we're all doing this thing right now.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Karl, I just want to say, the book is awesome. I've read it a couple times in preparation for the retreat, and then just kind of a casual reading actually on an airplane, and it was an easy read on an airplane. Just kind of go through it, hitting different chapters, and maybe not even reading in order, which was the nice thing. You just find a chapter I liked and just start reading it, and that's the kind of the nice thing about the book. It's designed that you can do that. I mean, it's not, you don't have to read it cover to cover. You can kind of piecemeal it if you want to, which makes it super nice. But bringing you on with the team retreat was pretty invaluable to us. And how would somebody get a hold of you if they wanted to do that, wanted to have you on a retreat or come in and help the team out or however, how would they get a hold of you?
So if you just want to check out the book, you can go to worklessearnmorebook.com. That'll give you all the info. And that does take you to my website. But if you want to get in touch about, further help, you can go to sakasandcompany.com. That's SAKAS, AND, the word company.com for Karl Sakas, Karl with a K.
Great. No, yeah, I definitely echo everything Jody said. Now, I would recommend to our listeners, definitely start with the book. Start with the book, start reading the book. And I think there's a lot of very practical, and that's what I liked best about it. There's a lot of very practical applications in there that you can kind of like sketch out on your own. And I think some people will probably be like, yeah, that's exactly what I need. And some people will be like, oh man, this is exactly what I need. I need to take this a little bit further and a little bit deeper, and then they can get a hold of you there. But I would definitely start with the book because I think a lot of people are going to get a really good starting point out of that and see differences pretty quickly. So definitely love the book and echo exactly what Jody said. And yeah, great job putting that together. And I'm sure the agency world really appreciates all you do.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, that's it for today. So thanks to both Jody and Karl for joining us. I think this was a great episode.
Yep. Thank you.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website, summitcpa.net, to get more tips and strategy for achieving business success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.